Welcome to the Headwaters Science Center 3:30 show. I know it might look like I'm in the kitchen, but just because I have vegetables doesn't mean we're not doing science. So you're saying, you might be thinking, wow, you're saying that I can do science right in my own kitchen? Yes, that is exactly what I'm saying. And this is today what I'm going to be talking about is something that people have been doing for hundreds of years. What I'm going to be talking about is fermentation. Fermentation is basically the opposite of photosynthesis. Photosynthesis is where you're taking water, carbon dioxide, adding a little bit of sunlight to create these sugars and a little bit of oxygen. And in respiration is when you take apart those sugars to create energy. There's two different sides of respiration, or way to break down those sugars: aerobic respiration and anaerobic respiration. Aerobic respiration has to do with the presence of oxygen. Anaerobic respiration has to do with what happens when there's no oxygen available. So we are going to be talking about anaerobic respiration, and our main focus of today's show is going to be lactobacillus. Lactobacillus is a super awesome bacteria. And don't worry, this bacteria is good. It is found everywhere. It is found on our skin, on animal cells, on our plant cells, and even is found a home inside our digestive system. So when people are referring to, we want to make sure all the bacteria is gone, or we don't want to be around any more bacteria than we have to, sometimes there is helpful bacteria that actually give us help us digest foods further down, make nutrients more available. And some research says that lactobacillus is a great bacteria to have in your digestive system. So how do we use lactobacillus in the kitchen? Well, today we're going to be fermenting some pickles, or fermenting some cucumbers, and they'll have a similar taste as pickles. So pickles, you probably right away think about vinegar. Well, we don't need any of that stuff, so get that out of here. We're going to be making our own acidic environment. The bacillus, the lactobacillus, actually, as a byproduct of their anaerobic respiration, releases an acidic lacto acid, and creates an environment that a lot of other organisms are unable to survive in. So the lactobacillus actually is preserving these pickles all by itself. So let's take a look on how to do this. So I'm done with these carrots. I will get rid of them. I'll be using them later. I was just making a little bit of dinner for the rabbits. So I'll continue on with making dinner for the rabbits later. Right now, we're going to move on to creating fermented pickles. So what you're going to need if you are going to want to ferment vegetables, or fruits, or anything like that, you're going to need your fruit or vegetable. Today I'm using pickles. You don't have to use pickles. You can use carrots, you can use asparagus, you can garlic, you can use anything you can imagine can be fermented. And a lot of times people will mix ingredients to have flavored pickles. So like if you would like garlic pickles or dill pickles, you would insert garlic or dill blossoms into the jar with the cucumbers. So back to what we need for today. You're gonna need your fruit and vegetable. Today I'm having cucumbers. You need a fermentation jar. I'm just using a mason jar. You'll need a balance. You have a cutting board and a knife just in case you want to add anything. Measuring cup and water. So, oh, and salt. Need some. So the first step, let's add our cucumbers to our jar. I'm leaving my pickles or my cucumbers whole just because they're not super big cucumbers. All right, so we got our cucumbers in our dish. Now we're gonna have to create a brine. A brine is a combination of salt and water. So I'm gonna be making 3 cups of salt brine. A good rule of thumb, we're gonna be shooting for a 3% concentration of salinity in our brine. So we're gonna be shooting for about 7 grams of salt per cup. So I have 3 cups in here. I'm going to be measuring out 21 grams of salt on my balance. All right. Go up here. And let's finalize it. All right. So we have our 21 grams of salt, and typically you want to use sea salt or any or natural salts, something that isn't chlorinated or have any other additives to it. So I'm going to dissolve that into the water. While I'm dissolving this, let's talk about what the significance of salt water. Typically, so everything has a preferred environment that it likes to live in. And a lot of things, with an exception to sea living creatures, have a hard time dealing with the concentration gradient of imbalance of salt water and an internal homeostasis. So oftentimes organisms that aren't meant to live in high concentration of salt aren't able to live. So that's what we're going for here. We're creating a high salinity environment that is going to be tough for other microorganisms besides the lactobacillus to survive. Oh shoot, Chuck, I forgot the lactobacillus. Do you have any lactobacillus?
I had some in my pocket this morning. I don't know what happened to it.
Oh no! Well, where could I possibly get some lactobacillus? Wait a second, I think maybe if I look close enough on this cucumber, there's some lactobacillus on the skin. remember we talked about lactobacillus is everywhere on our skin, on the cucumber skin. So this is something that you don't need to pre-order. You do not need to look it up. You do not need to have a specialty lab to do. Lactobacillus is on the cucumber skin.
You didn't really see it there. You need a microscope for that.
That is correct. Lactobacillus is a microorganism and is a bacteria, so it is very small. You would need a significant microscope to be able to see it. All right, so it looks like I have my salt brine. There should be 3% salt salinity in this water, and the next step is going to be adding it into our pickle jar, or our fermentation jar. So I'll add it into this. This is a good time to add any flavorings that you want. Mix and match, create different recipes. So I fill them up, and I make sure that the cucumbers are able to sink below the water line. You want everything submerged in water. So you may be seeing that cucumbers are going to want to float. So they're floating to the top. If you really want to get into it, you can buy weighted fermentation weights, or you can just find a small dish of some sort, weigh it down. You can find something that will just weight it down, make sure that the water is above the cucumbers. So, and then you're going to want to cover it up with some breathable material. It doesn't need to be airtight because you still want the gases to be able to enter and release, and you just don't want to be introducing any other like air or dust particles and stuff like that. So some sort of cloth or saran wrap, lay over it. That will do just fine. So this is a form of fermentation. Fermentation doesn't always have to happen right here in a pickle jar. Fermentation happens when you eat your yogurt. That's how lactobacillus is actually taking part in the fermentation of dairy products to create a semi-solid goo that we call yogurt. So other forms could be possibly yeast. Yeast is performs anaerobic fermentation similar to the lactobacillus, except for instead of the algae, the yeast having products of lactic acid, the yeast is producing ethanol in a form of alcohol. So that's where you get your brewing beer and wine. You add your yeast, and it goes through anaerobic fermentation, creates alcohol. So fermentation is one of the oldest science experiments that humankind have been performing. And without fermentation, who knows where we would be? Because this allows us to preserve vegetables and nutrients for very, very long times, for very, very long periods of time. So once you complete when is the fermentation done? That's a great question. Basically, you can let it go for up to six months. If you would like to do a slower fermentation, you could do higher concentration of salt, and that will allow it to ferment longer. But as you go through the months, the weeks, you can taste test them. After a week or two, pull one out, try it. If it is to your liking, then you can start eating them. If you would like to get more of the fermentation flavor, then leave them in longer. So that is the process of Pickle Science. Is there any questions in the audience? Yeah, what do you
get? Does that make vinegar in there?
This is making a different type of acid, lactoacid,
And
which is similar to vinegar because vinegar is also an acid. Vinegar has, I forgot what the acid is specifically in vinegar, but it is slightly different.
so it gives it a sour taste?
Yep, it'll give you just similar to a pickle, except for when you're eating it, it will have live cultures of lactobacillus, which we said in the beginning of the show is awesome for your digestive health and gut biota.
But, okay, there's lactobacillus on the pickle, on the cucumbers, but was there other bacteria there?
There is bacteria everywhere. Bacteria is covering everything that we can touch, feel. Bacteria is covering everything. That's the purpose of this salt water. Salt water is creating a non-preferable environment for the other bacteria. Or initially, as fermentation continues, more and more acid is being released as a byproduct of lactobacillus anaerobic fermentation. So as it continues to ferment, the lactobacillus is creating an acidic environment, which is also a tough environment for most organisms to live. So that's why you can preserve these cucumbers for so long, because there's not other organisms trying to eat them, decay them.
Cool.
All right. Well, thank you for tuning in to the Headwaters Science Center 3:30 show. I'm Spencer Potter, and I better finish up the rabbits' dinner. Otherwise, they might be a little upset with me. So I got to get going. Thank you for tuning in. If you want to come down and experiment with fermentation, come on down to the Headwaters Science Center, downtown Bemidji. Visit us Monday through Saturday, 9:30 to 5, and swing by after lunch on Sunday, 1 p.m. to 5 p.m.